In the world of emergency dispatch, there's an unwritten rule that separates the professionals from everyone else. You stay on the line, you guide them through, but you never cross that invisible barrier between helper and hero. For 12 years, Maria Santos had followed this rule without question. She was the calm voice in the storm, the steady presence that guided people through their darkest moments from the safety of her dispatch center chair. But, on a cold Tuesday morning in November, when the call came through at 6:47 a.m., Maria would discover that some emergencies don't just ask for your voice, they demand your soul. The frantic whispers on the other end of the line would shatter every protocol she'd ever learned and force her to make a choice that would redefine not just her career, but her understanding of what it truly means to save a life. What happened in the next 43 minutes would become legend in emergency services across 3 states. It would be studied in training academies, debated in conference rooms, and whispered about in dispatch centers everywhere. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary acts of courage don't come from those wearing badges or driving ambulances, they come from ordinary people who refuse to let protocol stand in the way of doing what's right. This is the story of the day Maria Santos stopped being just a voice on the radio and became the lifeline that pulled someone back from the edge of forever. Maria Santos had always believed that voices could save lives. In her 12 years as an emergency dispatcher for Metro County, she had talked people through heart attacks, guided them through house fires, and held their hands through words when their world was falling apart. Her headset was her lifeline to humanity, her microphone the tool that connected desperate souls to hope. That Tuesday morning started like any other. The dispatch center hummed with its usual controlled chaos, phones ringing, radios crackling, keyboards clicking as her colleagues worked their way through the night's emergencies that had carried into the morning shift. Maria sat at Station 7, her lucky spot, sipping her third cup of coffee and reviewing the incident reports from the overnight crew. The fluorescent lights cast their harsh glow over the room filled with monitors, maps, and the constant electronic chatter that had become the soundtrack to her life. She knew every street in Metro County, every shortcut the ambulances could take, every fire station's response time down to the minute. This was her world, and she was good at it. At exactly 6:47 a.m., line 3 lit up. Maria glanced at the caller ID display, cell phone, location services showing somewhere on the outskirts of the county. She slipped on her headset and hit the answer button with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this thousands of times before. Metro County Emergency Services, this is Maria. What's your emergency? The voice that came through was barely a whisper, so quiet she had to strain to hear it. Please help me. I can't. I don't know what to do. Maria immediately adjusted her headset volume and leaned forward. The caller sounded young, female, and terrified. Okay, I'm here to help you. Can you tell me your name and what's happening? My name is Katie. Katie Morrison. I think I'm going to die. The words sent a chill through Maria's experienced spine. She'd heard those words before, but something in this girl's voice was different. There was a resignation there, a finality that made Maria's heart skip. Katie, I need you to stay with me, okay? Tell me where you are right now. I'm in my car. I drove to the old bridge on Miller Road. You know the one that goes over the gorge? I can't do this anymore. Miller Road Bridge. Maria's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up the location. The bridge was 23 miles outside the city, spanning a deep gorge that dropped nearly 200 feet to rocky ground below. Her stomach dropped as the pieces fell into place. Katie, I want you to take a deep breath with me, okay? In through your nose, out through your mouth. Can you do that? While Katie's shaky breathing filled her headset, Maria was already typing rapid messages to her supervisor, requesting immediate dispatch of emergency units to Miller Road Bridge. But, even as her fingers worked automatically through the protocols, her mind was calculating response times. 23 miles on winding county roads. Best case scenario with the sheriff's department, 18 minutes. Ambulance, 22 minutes. Fire rescue, 25 minutes if they were lucky. I did it, but it doesn't help, Katie whispered. Nothing helps anymore. I've been trying for so long, and I'm so tired. I'm just so tired of hurting. Maria closed her eyes for a moment. In all her years of dispatch, she'd handled crisis calls before, but most of them involved immediate physical danger, someone having a heart attack, a house fire, an accident. This was different. This was someone calling to say goodbye. Katie, I can hear how much pain you're in right now. That takes incredible strength to reach out when you're hurting this badly. You called me because part of you wants to find another way through this, right? There was silence for a long moment, and Maria held her breath. Finally, Katie spoke, her voice even smaller than before. I don't know. Maybe. I don't want to hurt anymore. I understand. And I'm going to stay right here with you until we figure this out together. But, Katie, I need you to do something for me. I need you to move away from your car. Can you do that? Why? Maria had to be careful here. She couldn't let Katie know that emergency vehicles were already racing toward her location. If Katie realized help was coming, she might panic and act before anyone could reach her. Because I want you to be able to hear me clearly, and sometimes car phones can cut out. There should be a guardrail or somewhere safe you can sit, right? There's a little area with some benches. The county put them in last year for people who want to look at the view. That sounds perfect. Can you walk over there for me? Take your phone with you, and keep talking to me. Maria heard the car door slam and, then, Katie's footsteps on gravel. Through her headset, she could hear the sound of wind and, faintly, the rushing water far below in the gorge. Okay, I'm at the bench, Katie said. Good. Now, I want you to sit down and look around. What do you see? It's actually kind of beautiful up here. The sun is just starting to come up, and there's mist rising from the water down below. The trees are all turning colors. I forgot how pretty it could be. Maria felt a flicker of hope. It sounds gorgeous. I've never been to that bridge, but you're helping me picture it. What else do you see? There's a hawk circling over there. It's just riding the air currents, not even flapping its wings. It looks so free. As Katie talked about the scenery, Maria continued coordinating behind the scenes. Her supervisor, Bob, appeared at her shoulder with a note, Sheriff ETA 15 minutes. Fire Rescue 20. Crisis Counselor 25. Keep her talking. Maria nodded without breaking her conversation with Katie. She'd learned long ago that in emergency dispatch, you became an actor. No matter what chaos was happening around you, your voice had to remain calm and controlled for the person on the other end. Katie, that hawk sounds amazing. You know, birds like that can see for miles from up there. They have this incredible perspective that we don't get from down on the ground. Tell me, have you ever felt like you were flying? Like you had that kind of perspective on your life? Maybe when I was little. I used to climb this big oak tree in our backyard and sit in the highest branch I could reach. I felt like I could see everything from up there. My mom used to worry I'd fall, but I never did. I was careful. You were careful. That tells me something important about you, Katie. Even as a little girl, you knew how to keep yourself safe. That part of you that climbed carefully, that part is still there. Katie was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. I don't feel careful anymore. I feel reckless. Like I've been making terrible choices and hurting everyone around me. What happened that made you feel that way? Everything. My parents got divorced last year, and they kept fighting about who had to take me. Like I was this burden nobody wanted. Then, I started college, and I thought things would get better, but I couldn't keep up. I'm failing 3 classes. I lost my part-time job last week because I kept missing shifts when I couldn't get out of bed. Maria's heart ached listening to this young woman's pain. That sounds like an incredible amount of loss and stress all at once. No wonder you're feeling overwhelmed. But everyone else seems to handle things fine. My roommate never seems stressed about anything. My friends all seem to have their lives figured out. I feel like I'm broken or something. Katie, can I tell you something? I've been taking emergency calls for 12 years. I've talked to people from every walk of life, every age, every background you can imagine. And, you know what I've learned? Nobody has it figured out as much as they pretend to. Everyone is just doing their best to get through each day. Through her peripheral vision, Maria could see Bob coordinating with the sheriff's department. She caught fragments of radio chatter, units moving into position, protocols being established. But Katie couldn't know any of that yet. Really? Katie asked. Really? Just last week, I took a call from a woman who seemed to have everything together, great job, beautiful house, perfect family. But she was calling because she'd locked herself in her bathroom and couldn't stop crying. She felt like a fraud because everyone thought she was so successful, but inside she felt just as lost as you do right now. What happened to her? We talked for a while, and I connected her with some resources for help. Last I heard, she was doing better. Not perfect, but better. And, Katie, that's all any of us can do, just try to be a little better than we were yesterday. Maria glanced at her screen. The first sheriff's deputy was 8 minutes out. She needed to keep Katie talking, keep her grounded in conversation until help arrived. Katie, I want to ask you something. And I need you to really think about your answer, okay? Okay. If there was one person in your life, just one, who would be really hurt if something happened to you, who would that be? The question hung in the air for a long moment. Maria could hear Katie's breathing through the headset, could almost feel her thinking through the silence. My little brother, probably. Danny. He's only 14, and he still looks up to me even though I'm such a mess. He keeps texting me these dumb jokes and memes, trying to make me laugh. Yesterday he sent me this video of a cat that looked exactly like our old cat, Mr. Whiskers. He said it made him think of me. Maria smiled despite the gravity of the situation. He sounds like he really loves you. He does. And I love him too. But maybe he'd be better off without having a failure for a sister. Katie, I want you to imagine Danny in 10 years. He's 24, maybe starting his career, maybe in a relationship. And, let's say he's going through a tough time, the kind of tough time everyone goes through at some point. Who do you think he's going to want to call? Who do you think he's going to want to talk to about it? I don't know. I think he's going to want to call his big sister. The sister who taught him how to laugh at dumb jokes, who shared memories of Mr. Whiskers, who understands what it's like to struggle and come through it. Katie started crying again, but this time Maria could hear something different in it, not just despair, but a kind of recognition. But what if I can't come through it? What if I just keep failing at everything? Then, you keep trying. Katie, do you know what courage is? Being brave? That's part of it. But real courage isn't about not being scared or not having problems. Real courage is being scared, having problems, feeling like you can't go on, and then getting up the next morning anyway. You've been showing incredible courage just by surviving everything you've been through. Maria's screen showed 5 minutes until the first responder arrived. She could see Bob coordinating with the crisis counselor who was en route, making sure they had all the information they needed. Katie, I need to tell you something. And I want you to stay calm when I do, okay? What? I've sent some people to come talk with you in person. Not to force you to do anything, just to be there with you and help us figure out the next steps. There was a sharp intake of breath. You called the police on me? I called people who are trained to help in situations like this. People who care about what happens to you, just like I do. I don't want to go to a hospital. I don't want to be locked up somewhere. Nobody wants to lock you up, Katie. They want to help you find resources and support so you don't have to carry all this pain by yourself anymore. Maria could hear a car engine in the background through Katie's phone. The first responder was getting close. Katie, are you still there with me? Yeah, I'm here. I can see a sheriff's car coming up the road. That's Deputy Martinez. He's good people, Katie. He's been doing this for 15 years, and he's helped a lot of people work through tough situations. I'm scared. It's okay to be scared. But remember what we said about courage? You've already shown so much courage today by calling me, by talking about your pain, by thinking about Danny. This is just the next step. Deputy Martinez's cruiser pulled up slowly, deliberately non-threatening. Maria could hear his car door close through Katie's phone, followed by the sound of boots on gravel. She'd worked with Martinez before on several calls, and she knew he understood the delicate balance required in crisis situations. Katie, can you see Deputy Martinez? Maria asked gently. Yes, he's walking over here. He looks kind. Through her headset, Maria could hear Martinez's voice in the background, calm and measured. He was introducing himself to Katie, asking if he could sit down beside her on the bench. Maria felt a wave of relief. Martinez was doing everything right. Maria, the deputy wants to talk to you, Katie said. Put him on speakerphone so we can all talk together, okay? A moment later, Martinez's familiar voice came through the line. Hey Maria, thanks for the good work here. Katie and I are just getting acquainted. How are you doing, Katie? Maria asked. Okay. You know, Katie, Maria said, when I was 20, I was so sure I was going to be a teacher. I had my whole life planned out. But then, I failed student teaching twice. I felt like such a failure that I didn't leave my apartment for a week. Really? But, you seem so together now. That's because you're meeting me 15 years later, after I've had time to figure some things out. But, at the time, I felt exactly like you do right now. Like I was broken and everyone else had some secret manual for life that I'd never received. Martinez added his own perspective. I wanted to be a firefighter when I was your age. Took the test 3 times and never passed. Thought my life was over. Sometimes the path we end up on isn't the one we planned, but it turns out to be exactly where we needed to be. As they talked, Maria noticed something interesting happening. Katie's voice was getting stronger, more present. She was asking questions, engaging with their stories, even laughing occasionally at Martinez's dry humor. The crisis counselor had arrived and was standing by, but Maria sensed that something important was happening in this three-way conversation that shouldn't be interrupted yet. Katie, Maria said carefully, I want to ask you something. When you woke up this morning, was your first thought really about ending your life? Or was it about ending the pain? Katie was quiet for a long moment. The pain, I think. I just wanted the hurting to stop. I thought so. Because if you really wanted to die, you probably wouldn't have called me first. Part of you was looking for another way to make the pain stop. Maybe. But I don't know how to do that. Well, that's what we're going to figure out together. But, Katie, I need you to understand something. The kind of pain you're feeling, it's real, it's serious, and it's not your fault. But, it's also treatable. There are people who specialize in helping people work through exactly what you're experiencing. Martinez chimed in. My partner went through something similar a few years back. Depression, anxiety, the whole works. He got some help, talked to a counselor, got on some medication for a while. Made a world of difference. But, what if people think I'm crazy? Maria felt her heart clench. Katie, asking for help when you're struggling isn't crazy. It's smart. You know what would be crazy? Suffering in silence when there are people trained to help you feel better. As the morning progressed, something unprecedented began to happen. The crisis counselor, Dr. Sarah Chen, joined the conversation, but, instead of taking over, she worked collaboratively with Maria and Martinez. The four of them became an impromptu team, each bringing their own perspective to help Katie see her situation differently. Dr. Chen explained how depression worked, how it could make everything seem hopeless when in reality there were many options Katie hadn't considered yet. Martinez talked about resources in the community, support groups for young adults, programs at the local college for students who were struggling academically. But, it was Maria who seemed to connect with Katie most deeply. Maybe it was because Maria had been the first voice Katie heard when she was at her lowest point, or maybe it was because Maria's own struggles in her 20s resonated so strongly. Whatever it was, Katie kept directing her questions and comments primarily to Maria. Maria, what if I try to get help and it doesn't work? What if I'm just too broken to fix? Katie, you're not broken. You're hurt, and hurt things can heal. But healing takes time, and it takes support. You don't have to do it alone. Will you help me? The question caught Maria off guard. In 12 years of emergency dispatch, she'd never had someone ask her for ongoing help. Her job was crisis intervention, immediate response, getting people connected to the right resources. She wasn't a counselor or a social worker. But, looking at this situation, Maria realized that something extraordinary was happening. The protocols she'd followed for over a decade suddenly seemed inadequate. This wasn't just about getting Katie through a crisis moment, this was about helping her build a bridge back to hope. Katie, my job is usually just to help people through emergencies and connect them with the right long-term help. But this feels different. Let me talk to my supervisor about what we can do. Maria muted her headset for a moment and turned to Bob, who had been quietly monitoring the situation from a few feet away. Bob, I know this is outside normal protocol, but I think Katie needs more than just a handoff to other services. She's connected with me, and I'm worried that if we break that connection right now, we might lose her. Bob looked thoughtful. He'd been in emergency services for over 20 years and had seen his share of unusual situations. What are you thinking? What if I stayed involved in her case? Not as her counselor, obviously, but as a support person? I could check in with her, help coordinate her care, be a consistent point of contact while she's getting established with other services. Maria, you know that's not how we usually do things. I know. But this isn't a usual situation. And isn't our job ultimately about saving lives? I think Katie's life is still at risk if we just hand her off to someone else right now. Bob considered this for a moment. Let me make some calls. See what we can work out. While Bob was on the phone with their department chief, Maria unmuted her headset and rejoined the conversation. Katie, Martinez, and Dr. Chen were discussing practical next steps, getting Katie connected with a regular therapist, looking into academic support services at her college, even exploring whether she might benefit from a temporary medical leave to focus on her mental health. Maria, are you still there? Katie asked. I'm here. I'm always here. Dr. Chen is really nice, and she's given me some good information. But I keep thinking about what you said earlier, about courage being getting up the next morning even when things are hard. I think I want to try to do that. I think you can do it, Katie. And I think you're going to be surprised by how much strength you have once you start getting the support you need. Bob appeared at Maria's shoulder again and handed her a note. Chief approved extended involvement. Work with Dr. Chen to develop support plan. Maria felt a surge of gratitude for her supervisor and her department. They were willing to think outside the box when someone's life depended on it. Katie, I have some good news. My department is going to let me stay involved in helping you. What if emergency dispatch could partner with mental health services to provide extended support for people in crisis? Maria felt her heart skip. You mean like a new program? Exactly. This situation has shown me how effective it can be to have multiple types of support working together, and how important it is to maintain connection with the person who first reached out. We could develop protocols for dispatchers to stay involved in appropriate cases, working as part of a larger care team. That sounds amazing, Katie said. It could help other people who feel as alone as I did this morning. As the morning turned into afternoon, the group worked together to develop an immediate safety plan for Katie. She would go home with Martinez providing transportation, spend the afternoon with Dr. Chen, and have dinner with her brother Danny, who had been contacted and was driving up from their hometown. Maria would call Katie that evening to check in, and they would talk every few days as Katie got established with regular counseling and other support services. Dr. Chen would work with Maria's department to develop guidelines for this new collaborative approach. But, perhaps most importantly, Katie was no longer alone with her pain. She had a team of people who believed in her ability to heal and who were committed to helping her find her way back to hope. As Katie prepared to leave the bridge with Martinez and Dr. Chen, she asked to speak privately with Maria one more time. "Maria, I need you to know something. When I drove out here this morning, I was absolutely sure that today was going to be my last day alive. But, talking to you, feeling like someone actually understood what I was going through, it changed something for me." "You changed something for me too, Katie. You reminded me why I became a dispatcher in the first place, to be a voice that helps people find their way through the darkness. Will you really call me tonight?" "I'll call you tonight, and tomorrow, and as many days as you need me to until you feel strong enough to walk forward on your own. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for calling me, and for being brave enough to stay on the line even when everything felt hopeless." 6 months later, Maria was sitting in a conference room filled with emergency services personnel from across the state. The walls were lined with charts and graphs showing statistics that would have seemed impossible just a year ago: crisis call resolution rates up 37%, follow-up care engagement up 52%, and, most importantly, successful intervention outcomes up 41%. But, the numbers only told part of the story. The Katie Morrison case changed everything about how we think about emergency response, Chief Anderson was explaining to the assembled dispatchers, paramedics, police officers, and mental health professionals. What started as one dispatcher going above and beyond has evolved into a completely new model of crisis intervention. Maria looked around the room and saw faces she recognized from departments throughout the region. Word about the collaborative approach they'd developed had spread quickly through emergency services networks. What had started as an improvised response to one young woman's crisis had become a formal program being implemented across 3 states. The program was simple in concept but revolutionary in practice. When emergency dispatchers received crisis calls involving mental health emergencies, they could choose to remain involved beyond the initial intervention, working as part of a coordinated care team that included mental health professionals, law enforcement, and medical personnel as needed. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had become the program's clinical director, stood up to address the group. The traditional model of emergency response assumes that once we've connected someone to appropriate services, our job is done. But, what we learned from Katie's case is that the relationship formed during a crisis call can be incredibly powerful for ongoing recovery. Maria thought back to that Tuesday morning at Miller Road Bridge. It seemed like a lifetime ago, though the memory was still vivid in her mind. Katie calling in the darkness of despair, the careful navigation of those first crucial minutes, the decision to stay involved beyond normal protocol. "Maria, would you like to share some of the outcomes you've seen?" Chief Anderson asked. Maria stood up, still not quite comfortable being the center of attention at these conferences. "In the 6 months since we started this program, I've stayed involved with 17 crisis cases. Of those, 15 people are still actively engaged in ongoing treatment and support services. 2 moved out of state but are connected with similar programs in their new locations." She paused, thinking about each of those cases. There was Jerome, a veteran struggling with PTSD who had called from his garage with a gun in his lap. There was Mrs. Patterson, a widow who had taken a bottle of pills after her husband's funeral. There was Marcus, a teenager who had felt so bullied at school that he'd planned to end everything rather than face another day. Each case was different, each person's pain unique. But, the approach remained consistent: stay connected, work as a team, and never underestimate the power of someone believing in your ability to heal. The key insight, Dr. Chen continued, is that crisis intervention isn't just about the immediate moment. It's about helping people build bridges from their darkest hour to a place where they can see possibilities again. And, sometimes, the person who throws them the lifeline needs to stay connected to help them climb to safety. Deputy Martinez, who had also become a regular part of the program, spoke up from the back of the room. "From law enforcement's perspective, this approach has been transformative. Instead of just responding to crisis calls and hoping for the best, we're now part of ongoing solutions. We see people heal, not just survive." The conference continued for 2 days, with presentations on implementation strategies, funding models, training protocols, and outcome measurements. But, for Maria, the most meaningful moments came during the breaks, when individual dispatchers would approach her with questions about specific cases they were handling. I have this caller who's been struggling with addiction, one dispatcher from a neighboring county told her. She's called 3 times in the past month, always from different locations, always talking about ending it all. Traditional protocol says I just get her to services and move on, but I can tell she's not connecting with the resources we're providing. What's your instinct telling you? Maria asked. That she needs someone who will be consistent, who won't disappear after the crisis moment passes. Then, trust that instinct. Talk to your supervisor about staying involved. It might be but seeing Katie standing confidently in front of a room full of emergency responders was something Maria hadn't expected. 6 months ago, I drove to Miller Road Bridge planning to die, Katie began, her voice clear and strong. I was 20 years old, failing college, convinced that I was a burden to everyone who cared about me, and completely unable to see any way forward. The room was completely silent. Every person there had taken calls like the one Katie had made, but they rarely got to see the long-term outcomes of their interventions. I called 911 that morning not because I really wanted to be saved, but because I was scared and didn't want to die alone. I expected to get someone who would follow protocol, send help, and then move on to the next call. What I got instead was Maria Santos, who did something no one had ever done for me before. She treated me like I mattered. Katie looked directly at Maria, who felt tears starting to form in her eyes. Maria didn't just talk me off that bridge. She stayed with me while I learned how to build a new one, a bridge back to hope. She described the text messages Maria would send during particularly tough days, simple things like thinking of you or remember how far you've come. Maria taught me that healing isn't a destination you arrive at, it's a journey you take one day at a time, and it's easier when you don't have to walk alone. When Katie finished speaking, the room erupted in sustained applause. But Maria barely heard it. She was thinking about all the voices she'd heard over the years, all the people who had called in their darkest moments looking for someone to care whether they lived or died. During the final session of the conference, the organizers announced that the Collaborative Crisis Intervention Program would be expanding to 5 additional states within the next year. Universities were developing specialized training curricula for dispatchers. Federal funding had been allocated to support implementation. But, perhaps most significantly, the program was being studied by researchers who believed it could serve as a model for reimagining emergency mental health response nationwide. What we've learned, Dr. Chen explained in her closing remarks, is that healing happens in relationships. When someone is in crisis, they need immediate safety. Yeah, I wanted to see it again, but this time through different eyes. On the back of the frame, Katie had written, "For Maria, who taught me that every ending can be a beginning. With gratitude for helping me find my wings." Katie, this is beautiful. But, more than that, the fact that you could go back there and see beauty instead of just pain, that shows how much strength you found. I found it because you helped me look for it. And, now I want to help other people find theirs. Katie went on to explain that she was planning to apply for an internship with Dr. Chen's program after she graduated. She wanted to work with crisis intervention, to be part of the team that reached out to people in their darkest moments. I want to be the voice that helps people build bridges back to hope, just like you were for me. As Maria drove home that evening, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 12 years ago, she'd become an emergency dispatcher because she wanted to help people in crisis. But, she'd never imagined that helping people might mean staying connected to them beyond the immediate emergency. The Katie Morrison case had changed more than just crisis intervention protocols. It had changed Maria's understanding of what it meant to serve others, what it meant to be truly present for someone in their time of need. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jerome, the veteran she'd talked off a bridge 3 months earlier. "Maria, wanted you to know I got the job I interviewed for. Starting Monday. Thanks for believing I could do it." Another message followed immediately, this one from Mrs. Patterson, 6 months clean and sober today. "Thank you for helping me remember I had reasons to stay." And then, another, from Marcus, got accepted to college. "Can't wait to study psychology so I can help kids like me." Maria smiled as she read each message. This was the ripple effect she'd never anticipated when she first answered Katie's call that Tuesday morning. Every life saved created the possibility of other lives being touched, other people being helped. When she arrived home, Maria found her husband cooking dinner and her teenage daughter doing homework at the kitchen table. Normal life, ordinary moments. But somehow they felt more precious now, more meaningful. "How was the conference?" her husband asked. "Life-changing," Maria replied. "I think we're really onto something with this new approach." Her daughter looked up from her math homework. "Mom, you always talk about how important your job is, but I never really understood it until I heard Katie speak at the community center last month. She said you saved her life." "We all saved each other, honey. That's what I'm learning, that helping people heal isn't something you do to them or for them. It's something you do with them." That night, as she had done every night for the past 6 months, Maria made her evening check-in calls. Katie first, who was doing well in her new social work classes and had just been selected for a peer counseling program at her college. Then, Jerome, who was settling into his new job and had started dating someone he'd met in his support group. Then, Mrs. Patterson, who was planning a trip to visit her grandchildren for the first time in over a year. Each call was brief, just a few minutes to check in and remind them that someone cared about their continued healing. But Maria had come to realize that these few minutes might be the most important part of her entire day. As she prepared for bed, Maria's thoughts returned to that Tuesday morning that had changed everything. Katie's whispered plea for help, the decision to break protocol and stay involved, the collaborative team that had formed around one young woman's pain. None of them had known they were creating something revolutionary. They'd just been responding to what felt right, what felt necessary, what felt like the most human way to address another human being's suffering. But sometimes, Maria reflected, the most important changes start that way, not with grand plans or official policies, but with ordinary people deciding to care a little more deeply, to stay connected a little longer, to believe a little more strongly in the possibility of healing. Tomorrow there would be new calls, new crises, new opportunities to throw lifelines to people drowning in despair. Some of those calls would be routine, handled within existing protocols. But others might become the starting point for relationships that would help someone build their own bridge back to hope. Maria had always believed that voices could save lives. Now she knew that sometimes, the most powerful way to save a life was to make sure that voice didn't disappear when the immediate crisis ended. In emergency dispatch, they had a saying, "Every call matters." But the Katie Morrison case had taught Maria something deeper. Every call was the beginning of a story, and sometimes the most important chapters were the ones written after the emergency was over. As she drifted off to sleep, Maria could hear her radio in the distance, crackling with the voices of her colleagues handling the night shift. Somewhere in Metro County, someone was answering calls, guiding people through their darkest moments, being the calm voice that helped them find their way to safety. And, maybe, just maybe, some of those dispatchers were learning to see beyond the immediate crisis, learning to recognize that healing happens in relationship, learning that sometimes the most profound act of service is simply staying connected long enough to help someone remember that they matter. The revolution in emergency response had begun with a single call, a single decision to care beyond protocol. But its impact would ripple outward for years to come, touching lives that Maria would never know about, creating connections that would help people find their way back to hope. Because in the end, that's what healing was all about, helping people build bridges from where they were to where they wanted to be, and making sure they didn't have to walk across those bridges alone.